to force platforms to pay media for the resumption of their content. We are faced with an unpleasant choice: to try to comply with a law that ignores the realities of the relationship between the network and the publishers, or to stop allowing news content on our services in Australia, he said. The Californian group in a press release Wednesday. With a heavy heart, we choose the second option. The Australian government is working on a binding code of conduct to govern the relationship between financially troubled traditional media outlets and internet giants, starting with Google and Facebook, which capture the majority of global digital advertising revenue. According to Facebook's announcement, its Australian users will no longer be able to see or share news links from local or international media. Australian media, for their part, will be prevented from publishing their content on pages of the platform. Google had also threatened to suspend its services in Australia, but it just announced a deal made with Rupert Murdoch's media group, News Corp, which includes the Wall Street Journal, New York Post, The Times, The Sun, The Australian. Unbalanced relationship. The Californian group has agreed to pay significant sums in return for the content of these press titles, which will appear on its platform launched last year, News Showcase. This historic partnership, according to the terms of the two companies, will allow it to escape the forced arbitration provided for by the future law in the event of failure of negotiations with the media. A lot of people will ask why we are reacting differently. From Google editor's note, admitted William Easton, Facebook director for Australia and New Zealand, in the statement. Google's search engine is inextricably linked with news, and news publishers don't voluntarily provide their content. In contrast, on Facebook, they choose to publish the news because it allows them to sell more subscriptions, grow their audience, and increase their advertising revenue, he explained. The world's leading social network says it has generated more than 5 billion links to Australian publications, estimated to be worth 407 million Australian dollars, 261 million euros, for the media. For Facebook, the gains are minimal, insists the leader. News accounts for less than 4% of the content people see on their feed. We have been explaining to the Australian government for months that the exchange of value between Facebook and publishers is largely in their favor, he concluded. The American group also specified that it would henceforth favor the media of other countries for its investments in information. Price to pay. On Monday, Australian Treasury Secretary Josh Frydenberg assured that discussions with Facebook and Google bosses Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai were moving towards a resolution of the dispute. The legislation, currently being studied in Parliament, would require the two groups to negotiate with each media a remuneration based on the traffic that the titles generate. If there is no agreement, an arbitrator would decide. Australia's biggest news groups, News Corp and Nine Entertainment, have estimated the compensation will amount to hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The deal with Google will have a positive impact on journalism around the world because we have firmly established that there is a price to be paid for quality journalism, said Robert Thompson, CEO of News Corp, on Wednesday. Google and Facebook, backed by the U.S. government, had claimed that the Australian project would undermine their business model and the very functioning of the Internet. But similar efforts for a more equitable sharing of advertising revenue are underway elsewhere in the world, notably in Europe. In January, Google announced the conclusion of a framework agreement which paves the way for the remuneration of French dailies under neighboring rights, this new prerogative similar to copyright introduced by a European directive 2 years ago. The media crisis has been made worse by the economic collapse linked to the pandemic. In Australia, dozens of newspapers have been closed and hundreds of journalists fired.